Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. As we enter the space of the Happy Rebel podcast, I invite you to gently focus your eyes, or if possible, allow your eyes to be fully closed. Take a deep, cleansing breath and exhale to ground into your body. Inhale deeply, visualizing a golden light in your heart center. With each exhale, imagine that light growing stronger and brighter. Continue breathing and hold this message. Embrace the balance between the light and the dark, the challenges and the victories. Wherever you are on your path, you are welcome here. With gratitude for this moment of grounding and connection, slowly open your eyes, return to this moment, and get ready to embark on this podcast adventure. Yay. All right. So welcome, everyone. I've got Dr. Tracy Rainwaters here, and I'm super excited for you all to get introduced to her. So, Dr. Tracy, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Hello, Kelly, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Well, I am Dr. Tracy Rainwaters. I am a human and animal chiropractor. I've had, for the last 18 years, I've actually specialized in animal chiropractic, has been my primary area of focus. But I do sort of jokingly say that I'm animal chiropractor turned shamanic practitioner, which has evolved into intuitive channel and being an interspecies intuitive. My work has really evolved and grown over the years, where I still maintain a very small animal chiropractic practice, but I do now primarily focus on doing one-on-one sessions with clients for their animals and for themselves, bringing the shamanic healing work into helping humans and animals thrive in harmony. And then also working just as an intuitive channel, teaching online courses, teaching people how to do animal communication and what I call soul channeling. And it's going to evolve into also, I've got an online shamanic course that I'm hoping to launch this year as well. So thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that there are so many things that I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
And the first one is, especially since you're going to launch a shamanic training course later this year, that's what I want to get into first.
Okay.
I would love an explanation for people on, just kind of the basics about what is shamanism and how should we think about it in today's society.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful place to start. And I think there are so many misconceptions as to what, a shamanic, like what that practice looks like and how it can really amplify and evolve in your day to day life. So I really hold shamanism, or it's really held as, much like Buddhism, it's a way of walking in the world and it's a way of living your life. So it's not a religion. It is not a faith based practice. It is like a very lived experience of coming into harmony with all of nature and the natural world. So, as shamans, we see all that exists on this planet as being conscious. So, it's really us developing a relationship with the natural world. So, the spirit of the earth, the spirit of the plants, the animal kingdoms, even the rocks, the stones, the crystals. We see all of that as being alive and being our allies in the natural world. So, one of the things that I resonate so deeply with in shamanism is it really is a way of walking in the world, being highly connected to the spirit. So to me, that's all that is. It is universal consciousness expressing through everything, and seeing ourselves as equal. Like we are co-creators. We are all equal. So we don't really, as a shaman, see ourselves, you know, higher, than the trees or the plants or the earth or the animals. It really is, how do we come into harmony and how do we have these co-creative relationships where we can go to nature or to the animal kingdom or to our spiritual allies, all of the beings that exist in the energetic realms for aid and support so that we can live a really balanced, very soul connected, harmonious life. So for me, it is a spiritual practice in the sense of it really is like, how do we walk in the world in a way that's really heart connected and really authentic, and that we're deeply grounded and rooted in nature?
Oh, I love that. That's so beautifully said.
Yeah.
I that just resonates. That description of shamanism resonates on such a deep level for me.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I definitely want to touch on is I think a lot of people have a preconception and a misconception of
Yes.
what a shaman is supposed to look like.
Yes.
And maybe just, and of course, the topic of cultural appropriation comes up whenever we talk about
Absolutely.
shamanism. It feels like such a sticky area. So, do you have any perspective on that?
Absolutely. And I think this is such an important conversation to have. So, my shamanic training, I was trained in a Peruvian tradition, and it's rich, it's beautiful. It seems to be in this moment in time the most popular form of shamanism that I'm seeing in North
Mm,
America. There are many, the Four Winds Society is where I originally received my training back in 2010. And they've done a beautiful job of bringing this ancient wisdom and making it very accessible to the modern person. But I think where I always got a little stuck, because there's this deep connection to, your lineage. And I'm like, well, I'm very pale, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, Northern European
mm,
woman. And I didn't feel, while the wisdom and the teaching and the medicine is absolutely beautiful and it absolutely changed my life, I didn't feel this deep connection to that lineage. So that really kicked me on my own journey of, what is the shaman like in the broader sense? And the more research I did, the original shamans really came from Northern Europe and Northeastern Europe, and they were primarily women. So I have a deep connection to I call it Norse shamanism.
mm.
So we've got a lot of lineage like in Norway, in Germany and Denmark. So I always joke I've got like this inner Viking that really wants to come out in this work. So the more
Yeah.
I looked into that and really felt like, well, that's my lineage, this Northern European, these shamans and how they had to live deeply connected to nature. I mean, that was just, it was survival. And the more I looked into it, and I'm like, well, the women who were what we would call the shamans. They were the spiritual healers. They were the seers. They were, we could say, the medicine person, within that tribe of people. They were always women.
Yeah.
And even when we look at Mongolia, which is actually where the word shaman came from, they were primarily, like medicine women. There were men as well, but they were medicine women. So it's actually something that's evolved over time where men learn from women how to use their intuition and how to use their psychic abilities to see and to commune with nature. It actually didn't start as a patriarchal thing. It's a very feminine thing. And then over time, men were trained in these medicine practices. And so what I see now more in South America, and I haven't done a super deep dive into the history of that, but what we've really seen over time is these roots of this deep spiritual healing, what we would now call psychospiritual healing, but really looking at healing from a soul level first instead of a physical level, and really looking at how do we, seek deep harmony with, in nature. Like the women were used as the seers to really know, like, well, where are the animals? Like, where do we need to go hunt? When is it a good time to get on a boat
Mhm.
and go, if we need
Yeah.
to go explore or do what we need to do. It was the women who used their psychic and intuitive abilities to do that. And then the men would go out and do the hunting. So I think it's an interesting reframe in a more modern culture that we've made men the heroes of these stories.
Mhm.
And I think it's a very common thing in North American culture when we look at the indigenous peoples of North America. They're actually not referred to as shaman, like they're medicine men, which is again, I am not in any way, shape, or form an expert here, but that was more of a medicine man would hold ceremony. So they would sit in ceremony for, around a fire, but they weren't necessarily doing the spiritual healing and the intuitive work in the same way that women are. So I feel like it's something that we have to be very careful when we think of the native peoples of North America. They really have medicine men, which basically they did initiations and held ceremonies, but traditionally in Northern Europe or all across Europe, the shamans were actually doing healing work for the physical body, for the soul, and really doing deep intuition to see, into the non-ordinary realms to gain information to bring it back into our literal world. That started as a very feminine practice that then men took over. And now I really feel like it's just our patriarchal culture. We've kind of put men,
Yeah.
as the pinnacle of that. So to kind of get back to the original question, when I look at the roots of shamanism, it is a very feminine practice, like using intuition, healing on a soul level, communing with nature. Like that is innately a feminine thing. It's not a masculine practice, and it is very different from like an indigenous medicine man or medicine woman. They're two different things altogether. So hopefully
Mm.
that helps.
That does. I mean, that's so helpful for me to be able to delineate those things and just to have that overview. And I'll tell you, so my family had the opportunity to go to Norway this past summer,
Oh, nice.
and it was so incredible. And I mean, we went to the north, like
Hmm.
Tromsø and really in that Arctic circle. And just the history that you are able to see there with both the Sami people, but also these deep Nordic traditions. We were able to go into a church that was a church that existed before Christianity came to Norway.
Hmm.
And they just, talked about the history of this was also a place where they worshiped the Norse gods. And it was a fishing community. So that was especially strong there. And
Yeah.
just getting to see this different perspective, that there are some other traditions that have existed for centuries and for millennia, and it's so different than what we think from our modern society, and we just assume that people have been living this way
Hmm.
forever. And you know what, the way we live now is just really actually really quite different.
It's very disconnected for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And one little thing that I want to add to that as well is, I think it's also really important to understand that when we're stepping on a shamanic path, it's just a deep connection to our who are we on a soul level. So I would say, like, who are you, Kelly, as an extension in the universe? And how is your relationship not only to self and to everything around you? So that's like the shaman's job is
Mhm.
to help a person sort of resolve whatever needs to be resolved to have that deep clarity as to who they are and how they can walk in the world in a deeply connected way. And I think Sandra Ingerman, who's been a teacher of shamanism for a very long time, I think she says it so beautifully where there is no external source that has a right to decide what level of connection you have to spirit. So anyone who decides to have this deep connection with themselves and with nature, and if the shamanic road or the practices and the ways of being really resonates with you, this is not something that's like anointed on you. It's not something that's gifted on you. It really is delineated by like the personal work that you do and a commitment to knowing yourself and having a deep connection to nature. So I think that's also important for people to understand. If someone is really coming from a place of deep ego of like, well, I have been anointed as a shaman. It's like, well, then you fundamentally don't understand what this is. And you're really using like a massive ego trip. And to me, that's like a giant red flag. So I
Yeah.
feel like there's a difference in claiming, like, yes, I'm a shaman, but it's not like I'm like this anointed holy person who's, seeing myself above everybody else. It's like, well, no, like a true path of a
Mhm.
shaman is very highly connected. It's a very lateral thing. We're all equal. So,
Yes. I'm so glad that you spoke to that. And I know it's something that before we hit record, that you said was everyone has the ability to have, or everyone has these abilities, everyone has
mm,
these gifts that they can access, whether maybe they look a little bit different for different
yeah.
people. I think there's how we receive messages or how things come through us can look different for everybody. But I just want to call that out because I think it's such an important message that for me, when I have a similar thing, when I see teachers who are like, I am the one who has this gift, I am the one who has this knowledge that is unique to me. I'm always like, oh, red
Yep,
flag.
huge
That,
red flag.
we all have these different gifts that we can access, and they just come to us in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I really tell a lot of my students too, it's like your intuition is your superpower. And the beauty, it's like we are all beautifully unique in that how our intuition works is very unique to each of us. So having that deep connected sense of understanding all of your non-ordinary senses, so your non-ordinary ways of perceiving what's happening around you is such a gift and a superpower. And it's not special in the sense like there's a small percentage of people on the planet who are born with this ability. I deeply believe like we all have it. Now, it may be easily like more accessible to some people, but that doesn't mean if it's a little bit a steeper climb for you to be very comfortable with your intuition, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just there may be other layers, conditioning or belief systems that we have that we just need to kind of look at and work with in the process. But we are all meant to be deeply intuitive, and deeply connected. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a question that just feels like it's nagging at me to ask
Mhm.
you, and I
Yeah.
don't know if you'll have a great answer for this or not, but is so connecting to nature, connecting to the natural world. And one of the things that intellectually that I think about is I have the privilege where I live on a lot of land. I live
Mhm.
out in the country, I have trees and nature all around me. I have
Yeah.
squirrels that are literally in my walls in my office building. That's the squirrels need to go away, but
Right.
whatever. Like I can hear them chattering in the background. And so I have this access to nature, and it's just so tangible for me. But do you have recommendations or suggestions for people who live in a city or maybe don't see as much greenery or as much natural life on practices or things that people can do in their own space or in the city that can connect them with that intuitive, natural, energetic space?
Yeah. So I actually do have a free meditation on my website, which is kind of perfect, because it really does help people connect to like, how do we do these groundings of really connecting our energy down into the core of Mother Earth? So you could be living in the middle of Manhattan, but when we learn how to energetically connect, down into the heart of Mother Earth. And then to me, it's also in the cosmos. So really bringing that earth energy and that high cosmic energy or heavenly energy and like bringing that balance in our heart and our being, you know, I think there's absolutely tremendous benefit to like being barefoot on the earth and being able to touch a tree and to really being surrounded in the serenity of nature. And unfortunately, for people living in an urban environment, that may not be possible. So I feel like developing some sort of, whether it's meditation or breath work, that allows you to go within and then connect down to the earth and then have some connection to what we would as shamans call the upper world. So whether it's the cosmos or source energy, whatever makes sense for you and your belief system, I think that's a beautiful way. I'm also a big fan of if you're living in an urban environment, so much of my natural allies are the animal kingdom. So I feel like if you are an animal person, if it's appropriate for your lifestyle to have a pet in your life, I mean, that's
Mm.
also, I feel like animals are so deeply sentient and so wise. Even just having that heart connection with an animal, I think they've done studies where it's like older people, when they go into retirement homes, having a pet or having a plant can extend like their lifespan and their quality of life. So I
Mhm.
would say like bringing plants into your home, and I'm like, give it a try, see what works for you. But just having something green and natural in your life, and if it makes sense with your lifestyle, and if you're really drawn to animals, I think even having a pet in your life where you're just being deeply connected to animals, all have unique energetic configurations and gifts that they're bringing here on the planet. So, dogs are great. They radiate love from the heart of source. So they are very woven into our hearts. So that's a
Yeah.
very deeply connecting experience. And cats are natural, like energy transmuters. So they really do take a lot of our heavy energy and transmute it for us. And they can bring a lot of stability and harmony into a home. So I would never recommend somebody who's not super drawn to animals to get one.
Yeah.
I would say start with a plant. But also, even if it's just 2 to 3 minutes a day of breathing with intention or, connecting a cord of energy down into the earth, we can like give the earth any of our heaviness to be healed and transmuted and then pull beautiful healing earth energy back. It's deeply grounding and deeply supporting.
Yay.
So,
I love
yeah.
that. And I love that you also mentioned breath work, because
Yeah.
I think that and it's something I've talked about before, but just the power of the breath
Yeah.
is incredible and what that
It's
can do.
Breathwork can be truly transformative, and I actually have one of my horses to thank for bringing me into breathwork. He actually had a huge problem with just being highly sensitive, and he would hold his breath. And for anyone who knows horses, usually when they hold their breath, there's a massive explosion that comes on the other side of that. So he really was the one that forced me to, like, I had to be very regulated in my nervous system and my breath when I was not only sitting on him, but around him. And I had to teach him how to breathe as well, and to reconnect to his breath. And that was hugely transformative for both of us. But I've also done a tremendous amount of holotropic breath work, which
Mhm.
mimics, it's very much like doing ayahuasca or any sort of plant medicine, but you're doing it just with breath and music. I've actually been trained. Stanislav Grof is the one who developed holotropic breath work, and one of his original students has a training program that he calls neo shamanic breath work that I've been trained in, which is basically, how do we use our breath to put ourselves into where we can access non-ordinary states of reality and gain deep wisdom? And it's all just through breathing and listening to music. And that to me has been one of the most profoundly impactful things that I've done in this life, of really allowing me to explore on a deeper sense of, like, who am I? So it's always my thing. Like, when I hear people wanting to do plant medicine, I'm like, oh, go do breath work first. You don't have to purge and take a
Yes.
psychoactive substance, and the breath work's super safe.
Yes. As someone who on here many times has talked about doing both,
Yeah.
I have a lot of experience with plant medicine, but I also have a lot of experience with breath work.
Nice.
And I think that's why I love it when people bring up breath work, is that you don't have to come off of your SSRIs. You don't have to worry
Mm.
about, some of the things that can come up with plant medicine with breath work. Like
You
it,
can
and
always
it
get
gets you
yourself
there.
out of something. That's what I love about
Mhm.
breath work too. It's like, if something feels overwhelming, you can just go back to normal breathing and, like, you're back.
Yeah.
Where plant medicine, it's like a sledgehammer to the forehead. Like, you are committed to having
Yes.
an experience for a certain amount of time. And I really deeply feel it's become very popular, obviously. And it can be really profound and transformative, but not everybody is a good candidate.
No, not
you know,
everyone's a good candidate, and also it can be used as means for what we refer to as spiritual bypassing. And I
Absolutely.
think that's the big downside for me, is that
Yeah,
people who go into it and then they're like, I can give up everything, or everything's perfect. Like I've reached enlightenment.
totally.
And mm,
Or, I also see, there are some well-known people where they're like, oh, I've done ayahuasca or plant medicine 1,000 times. And it's like, well, if you're doing it that often, you're not actually processing and working with I mean, that's the thing. I'm like, having this beautiful blown out experience of the one time I did ayahuasca. I mean, my God, I was taken, like, into the heart of God, and I saw the blueprint of the universe. I mean, it was, like, extraordinary, but I'm
yeah.
like, I'm now 14 years out of 13, 14 years out of that experience, and I'm still unpacking and learning.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like it takes a lot of deep reflection. You've got to sit with it and work it. So I think
Yeah.
too, where I see it's like that bypassing of people are like, well, I just want to go back and have this good experience, or I just want to go back, instead of really doing the deep personal work that also comes with having these really transformative experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely agreed. There's so much work that needs to happen between and as part of any work with plant medicine,
Yeah.
or even honestly, even breath work. There are things that for me and in a breathwork session that have come up that have just been like, wow, I need to spend some time
Yeah.
journaling, sitting with what that experience was and really be able
Yeah.
to integrate it, instead of I'm going back to my real life now and just moving on from
Yeah.
whatever that was that I saw.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
It's
that's cool.
it's
I'm
very
glad.
powerful medicine. And I also feel like breath work is such a huge umbrella. Like, there's so much that gets encapsulated in that. So I really, it can be, even just a very simple practice of taking, 5 to 10 minutes every day of breathing with intention. I mean, I think most people would be amazed that when we can commit to even 5 minutes a day, how you can drop into deeper states of connection and being, just by regulating your breath and your nervous system. I mean, it's deeply, deeply powerful.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, I do this thing. Well, I actually used to do this on my Instagram and have gotten out of the habit of doing it, but I did this thing called like one breath.
mhm.
And it was literally just to have people notice what what changes for them when they take in one single breath, like
Yeah.
one breath with intention in and out. And I know for me, like that, it changes my state. And
Yep.
all of a sudden I'm like, okay.
Everything's
And then do I
okay.
need more? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah. That's
It really
beautiful.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so getting back to your story and where you've kind of come from here. So coming from the world of chiropractic
Yes.
and how how did you first of all, well, I'll just say I'm also really curious about animal chiropractic because I go to the
Yeah.
chiropractor, I get, cracked and adjusted and it feels great, but just I would just love to dive a little bit deeper into where you started there with that side of
Yeah.
things.
So I was born an absolutely like horse crazy kid. Like I was truly one of those kids where I can't remember a time in my life, like even being teeny tiny, where I wasn't completely obsessed with horses. And I wasn't born into a horsey family. So it's not like we had horses at home and this was like a super normal thing.
Yeah.
But over the years, I'm really grateful that my parents, from a young age, they had to sacrifice a lot, but they did everything they could to allow horses to be a part of my life. And when I was a teenager, one of the family horses developed a weird bump on its back, and my mom was a nurse, and one of her coworkers was a horse person, and she was like, "Hey, I have this chiropractor come out and work on the horse. It's been really helpful." I'm so grateful. Like my parents actually said yes to the experience. So we had this guy come out. He was actually a veterinarian who specialized in animal chiropractic. This was like the early 90s. So this was like very fringe. Like I grew up in California. I think there were like two or three people in the whole state, that were doing animal chiropractic. And I remember I think about 14 and I saw him work on my horse and like the immediate, we could say nervous system regulation and physical changes in the horse's body that I always knew I wanted to work with animals as an adult. And my parents were very adamant about me going to college and not like riding horses professionally for a living. So I saw that and I'm like, that's the thing. That's the thing I want to
Yeah.
do. So, I ended up going through college. I actually did all my undergraduate work on an equestrian scholarship. So horses stayed a huge part of my life through undergraduate and then chiropractic school. So I always knew that I wanted to work on animals. And so as soon as I finished, I did go to a human chiropractic college. And as soon as I was done, I went to animal chiropractic school, which was an additional 6 months of training after my human chiropractic work. And I started out right away just having an all equine practice. The profession has now grown. It's become very mainstream. You have to be licensed as a vet or a human chiropractor, but it's really become like a huge industry, and very supportive for the health and healing of animals. But what I noticed started to happen when I started my practice, I would start putting my hands on horses and they would start sending me images of what was going on the inside of their body. And with some of my clients that I felt super safe, that I knew were pretty open, I'd just sort of ask them, like, hey, and I wouldn't even say, like, hey, your horse is showing me X, Y, and Z, but I would just be like, hey, did your horse happen to have, this sort of accident or have this event happen? And it just sort of started confirming that I'm like, okay, well, something's happening here. And then animals started like showing me like what was going on in their body was actually related to something emotional, like within their human. And I didn't know what to do with that. And that I just felt like a huge overstep of like, I don't know how to tell people that their animal is like telling me like what is sort of emotionally going on with them is causing a lameness issue in the horse.
Yes.
So that was sort of the first 4 to 5 years of my practice. And that was also about the time, a friend of mine, my mom was diagnosed with bone cancer, yeah, which was like a complete shock to all of our family. And a friend of mine was like, I just went and saw a shaman. I feel like you would be really drawn to this and you would like it. And I had no idea, like, I had no idea what it was, but it just felt like I got this big intuitive yes. And I had this shamanic healing. And it was one of those moments where everything in my life like came into high focus. I now looking back, like I was such an intuitive little kid. Um, And I just wasn't raised in a family that understood that or can nurture it or foster it. I also didn't understand that I was hearing, feeling, sensing animals all the time.
Mm.
So I really grew up feeling like there was something fundamentally wrong with me because I would always look at the outer world and I'm like, I don't understand why people act the way that they do. I don't understand why people treat animals the way that they do. And in a way that I didn't understand, I just sort of knew intuitively what was going on with people and what was bothering them. I think over the years, just turned all of that inward and felt like this highly sensitive person living in a very loud, noisy world. So when I had the shamanic healing, like it's like everything came into focus. And that's when I decided to go through the Four Winds. I did a 2 year training program with them, which was deeply transformative. And once I understood my intuitive abilities and how to work with energy and to do an energy healing, how to intuitively connect, like the channeling and the animal communicating, it sort of just arrived. But it's been, like we were talking before we hit record, it's been quite an experience coming out, in the world, like with these
Mhm.
abilities, because I've had a very thriving animal chiropractic practice. I mean, I was working on very high performance horses that were going to the Olympics and the World Equestrian Games, some very high profile horses and people. And it didn't really feel safe. And when I would sort of dip my toe out, it wasn't well received. So I really did feel like I was very single at the time. And I'm like, I've created this thriving business and it sort of is dependent on me keeping my mouth shut, which is a really
Wow.
challenging place to be. So it's been like this 15-year journey of finding my own confidence in who I am and how can I authentically use my voice to advocate for animals primarily, but also I think what I realized is like if we really want to advocate for animals, we have to get people connected. People have to be connected to their heart and to their intuition, and then like there's this natural evolution of that changes the engagement not only with the other people in their life, but with the animals and the earth. We can't, from my perspective, shout at people about like, well, we have to take care of the earth when people don't even know how to connect to their own heart and take care of themselves. Like to me, it's like we have to go internally first to
Mhm.
change how we
Yeah.
affect the external world. So it's been a journey. My husband and I moved from California to Washington in 2020. And that for me marked like I had this huge opportunity to really cut back my business and step away and to really dive into this aspect of who I am. And it's been wild, like bringing it to social media. It's been wonderful, but it is like this. I feel like it's constant layers of vulnerability of like opening my heart to the world. But I feel like the world needs it so much right now.
Yes.
So
Yeah, absolutely. How did you, just hearing you say that it wasn't necessarily well received and that there was this period of like, okay, shut it down, pull it back in. I have definitely had moments of that myself, whether
mhm,
it's just internal messaging or how I was raised, or whether, have also had some negative feedback from the outside. How did you end up getting to the point where, with that hurt and with getting that negative feedback, how did you then get brave enough to step out and be like, okay, yep, I had negative feedback before, but I'm going to try it again?
yeah. So this is where I feel like it's really important also for people to understand whether it's shamanism or some other form of connection or spirituality. It's not like you have a spiritual awakening and you're done. Or it's not like, oh, I did this training and did a lot of really deep personal work a few years ago, therefore I'm done. It is a constant evolution. I mean, so in shamanism, we have the medicine wheel, and it's just this thing of like, man, once you do one full revolution, your consciousness may go up, but like you start at the beginning and like you just keep going. So for me, it's, I've had to stay very connected to always looking at my shadow, like understanding like my own wounding and my trauma and like being committed to working with that. Like to me, that's where the confidence comes from. But also feeling like this is such a deep part of my life. Like I really felt like so much of the conflict in my life came from I'm not authentically walking in the world. Like there's this beautiful, deep, wise part of me that I feel like really does have value.
Yeah.
And the more I acknowledge that, the more rich and full my and like the more inner peace that I had. And the
Mhm.
thing is, like, once I own that, and stop being afraid of it. Like, even when people, if it doesn't resonate, it's kind of just like a shoulder shrug. Like, there's no conflict, there's no weirdness. It's like I really had to come into alignment to really accept, like, this is who I am. And it's okay. Like, what I have to offer doesn't need to be for everybody. And that for the people that resonate, it's like a vacuum. They do sort of find you. And when it's not in alignment for other people, they may fall away, but like, that's okay. It's not that I've done something wrong or that there's something wrong with me, which is like, that's a big part of my core wounding. It's like, you're not fundamentally wrong. There's just a different path for them. And if you allow them to gracefully go away, it just creates space for people who are more aligned.
Mhm.
So there have been a lot of tears in there too.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of, working with our stuff and our shadow and, having a relationship with that and just acknowledging at times like what feels like a rejection really isn't, but it's okay to
Mm.
also have this emotional feeling. And if I can acknowledge it, honor it, let it pass through me, you come out the other side feeling better. And there's usually many more people there waiting to like take up what you have to offer. So for me, I
Mm.
found more conflict in like the internalization of like, because I have had some clients, where I've really advocated for animals and it was really coming from an authentic place of like, here's the core of the problem and it's going to require the humans to change and they don't want to. Therefore, what was easier was to just let me go and bring someone else in. So I had to learn to be okay with that, knowing in my heart, like I was advocating and really being in alignment. And it is that wisdom of time. I can look back and go, every time I stayed true to myself, more doors opened, more opportunities came forward, and more aligned people came into my life. So that is like a little bit of the wisdom that comes with experience. So I feel like if you can have the courage to just keep going, a lot of people say I'm brave. I don't know that I think bravery is not about being confident. It's just having the tenacity to keep going. Um, and that's to where I've gained a lot of confidence. It's like, well, if I just keep going,
Mhm.
things typically always get better. So,
Yeah. That's
yeah.
funny that you say that about bravery because I just had a conversation with a friend of mine the other day that was like, "Am I brave or am I stupid?" And it's like, you know what? Sometimes it feels like
It's a little
there's
bit of both.
a yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit of both and a line between that, it's the double-edged sword where sometimes we need that not and stupidity is kind of the wrong word for it, but sometimes we need to just have blind faith to be able to keep moving
Yeah.
forward. And
Yeah.
it feels like stupidity sometimes.
Yeah. I feel like I've spent a lot of my life feeling like I'm swimming up current.
Yeah.
But what's also I've noticed, there were so many years where I feel like I had a muzzle on, like I couldn't speak my truth. And then one day, and it was like, I think around 2018, 2019, where I was even talking to a friend of mine that we went to shaman school together, where it's like all of a sudden, like I would go into a barn to work on a horse and people would be like, well, I had a shaman work on my, and I was like, wait, what happened that all of a sudden, like all of the stuff that I've been aligned with for years is now like totally okay. So I do feel
Yeah.
like the collective consciousness on the planet has evolved. And I think when I started, it wasn't mainstream, but now it is. And that in and of itself brings a little bit of safety, or actually a lot of safety.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yes. And it keeps coming to me as like, you can say, I'm a shaman, or you can say, I'm a shaman. And like,
Mhm.
just, the ownership that comes
Yes.
with that and the confidence to be able to say like, yeah, I'm holding this and this is part of who I am, or this is part of my training and background. And one version of that holds a lot of shame and one version has a lot of presence and groundedness.
Yeah, and it is speaking it like it's the most normal thing in the world because I feel like
Mm.
that opens the door for curiosity. When you really own it, like when it is embodied, you leave a lot of room for people to be curious about what you do, even if it's sort of like cautious. But it doesn't really leave a lot of space for people to be overly critical because you just
Yeah.
own it. Like it just is. Where when you're initially bringing like the energy of apologizing for it, it becomes a very easy thing for people to energetically sort of downplay or attack. So, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I just want to quickly ask, so you mentioned Sandra Ingerman and
Mhm.
you mentioned that you're training in Four Winds. Are there any other, resources or places of inspiration that you have found along your journey?
I think the number one person who's written a tremendous amount of books that I deeply resonated with is Linda Kohanov. So she's written like The Tao of Equus, and she's had several books, but she's really been on the ground floor of equine facilitated learning. So really bringing this deep shamanic perspective and like, how do we work with horses to have a deeper understanding of who we are as people and to have like a transformative process in their being. She's just a phenomenal teacher, speaker. She's written, I think, 5 or 6 books, and they're not just for horse people. I mean, she does work a lot with corporate America and people in leadership roles. So yeah, I think Linda is absolutely fantastic and very accessible to a wide range of people in different professions. But her work, it's real, it's authentic, and it's really beautiful.
Cool. Well,
So
thank you for the suggestion.
yeah.
And now we're at that point where you get to share with people anything that, where they can find you or anything that you want them to check out besides your meditation
Yeah.
and your hopefully upcoming shamanic course. But
Yeah.
I know you have other ones right now.
Yeah. So the best way to find me is either through my website, which is just tracyrainwaters.com. And yes, there is like a pop up. It's like a free grounding meditation on my website that anyone, can access. And then also Instagram is the next best way to find me. And that's just at dr.rainwaters. But yes, I do teach online classes. I do teach animal soul channeling, which is a channeled version of animal communication. And then, yes, I am planning this summer to launch a program called The Alchemy of the Soul, which is basically just a shamanic experience of like walking the shamanic road, understanding what that is, and taking yourself with my guidance, like through, the shamanic medicine wheel and understanding how to use this medicine in your day to day life.
Amazing. Cool.
Yeah. Thank
Awesome.
you.
I'll have to check it out too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I learned so much today. Like, genuinely have a totally a wider and deeper understanding of shamanism and all the ways that it moves in and through our world.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for having me. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.